Who exactly are the Velvet Room Attendants? They look humans, they act humans.
Shut up! I can't get out.
Okay, never mind. Anyway, in today's video, we'll be gathering details from the games, taking a look at different theories, and mixing all of them together to once and for all find out what the Velvet Room Attendants really are. Let's start with what actually confirmed in the games. The Velvet Room Attendants are created by Igor in order to assist the players, and while he never outright say he created them, it's pretty much implied and is something that the community agree on. That said, apart from the siblings, there are other entities in the Velvet Room that could be considered an attendants, for example Morgana's and Mary. But more importantly, in the older game like in Persona 1 and Persona 2, there were other characters like Nameless, Belladonnas, and the Demon Painters, who also work in the Velvet Room, but they feel more like residents who keep the place running rather than personal guides for the player. Oh, and they did not have the yellow eyes that all the sibling possesses. So while I like to acknowledge their existence for this video, when we talk about attendants, we will be focusing on the sibling, the one who helped the main character with fusion and growth. One of the oldest and most popular ideas about the Velvet Room Attendants is that they might actually be shadows. That theory mainly comes from one thing, their yellow eyes. In the Persona series, yellow eyes almost always mean a shadow. They appear in bosses, in enemies, and even in distorted humans, so it's not hard to see why people connect the dots. However, there is a problem with this theory. Shadows aren't supposed to be able to summon persona, and the attendants, of course, cannot only help the player summon personas, but they themselves also have their own set of personas, which technically make them way more closer to a wild cards who can hold on to multiple personas. However, can a shadow really not summon a persona? After all, we have characters like Metis and Teddies, whom the game labeled as shadows, but was able to do so. Well, let me tell you one thing now. They definitely can. So the idea that the siblings are shadows, while on the surface seem like the easiest one to cross out, actually isn't super impossible. But to explain how some shadows can summon a persona, I'll need more time. So for now, let's continue on to the next theory, which will also serve as a soft introduction to the idea that will answer to the initial question of what the Velvet Room Attendants really are. The next theory is the idea that the Velvet Room siblings represent the anima and the animus of the protagonist's psyche, which I'm sure most casual viewer probably don't know what that mean yet. Well, to understand it, we need to go back to the source of many of Persona's core concept, the work of Carl Jung, whose idea shaped much of modern psychology and inspired this series directly. Now, what we need to understand here is the concept of the self. To simply put it, it's the structure of the human psyche, the part that come together to form who you are as a person. Within it, which is divided into a conscious and unconscious part, there are several elements you might already recognize. For example, the shadow, the part of ourselves we unconsciously suppress, and the persona, the mask we consciously created to function in society. Now, one of the many pieces is what we call the enigma and the animus, which can be simplified to the opposite gender inside each person. A man will carry something called an anima, the feminine part of his mind, which can represent something like the emotional part of his mind that he's missing. And a woman will carry animus, the masculine parts of her, or the assertiveness that she might need to demand respect.
Excuse me, but this area is off.
I'm Nijima from the public prosecutor's office.
The prosecutor's office?
Okay, so back to Persona 3, or more precisely, Persona 3 Portable. At the start of the game, Igor asks whether you imagine his assistant as male or female. If you choose female, you get Elizabeth. If you choose male, Theodore appears. However, generally, most fans believe that it's canon for Kotone to choose Theodore and for Makoto to choose Elizabeth, which is pretty much what gave rise to the theory that Elizabeth represents Makoto Anima, while Theodore represents Kotone Animus. That said, this theory also leans on the fact that so far, every Velvet Room attendant has been opposite gender of the protagonist, including in Persona 4 and 5, but who knows, maybe Persona 6 will change that. Anyway, if that was interesting to you, the next detail I'm about to share is even more grounded, as it's tied to a small retcon that many people didn't even realize happened in the series. Starting from Persona 5, there are a small detail that most people miss. The Velvet Room attendant eyes didn't just grow yellow anymore. They also has this ring shape around the iris. This separates the attendants and other friendly collective unconscious beings from shadows, who only have solid yellow eyes. Additionally, this detail also makes a return in Persona 3 Reload, which means it's not just an update from Persona 5 onward, but it's also an intentional retcon going forward in the series. However, though, we still have to wait for Persona 4 Revival to confirm all of this, but it's safe to assume that Margaret should have the same ring now too. So why do the attendants have that extra ring in their eyes when the old one didn't? To understand that, we need to go back again to the idea of the self I talked about earlier. We already gone over the personas and shadow, but there's another idea called the ego, which often get overlooked. In simple terms, the ego is your sense of identity, the part of you that think I am me.
You got a name? Teddy!
Now, remember when I said I would explain how Metis and Teddy could summon Persona even though they are shadow? Well, in Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, it's explained that the ego is the core element that allows a being to gain the potential to summon a persona.
Indeed. Most of it is due to differences in their tactical mentalities. It may be on the cusp of what we would call an ego.
Considering how everything's been going so far, I'm starting to believe more in persona abilities.
To put it simply, a shadow that can summon a persona is one that has developed an ego, or a sense of self. And with everything I've explained so far, this is why I believe that the ring around the attendant's iris is meant to symbolize exactly that, a being from the unconscious realm that has developed an ego, which also explains why the Velvet Room attendants are able to summon persona. So, are they shadow with awareness then? Well, while this idea keeps the shadows theories alive, I personally don't think the siblings are the same kind of being as Teddy or Metis. I mean, after all, Jose also had a ring around his iris, but he's not a shadow.
If he's studying humans, does that mean he isn't one? I mean, he just seemed like some nice kid.
Well, he didn't feel like a shadow.
Which brings us to the next question. If the sibling is a being with an ego but aren't exactly shadows, then what are they? Let's revisit our Jungian psychology psyche diagram and zoom out for a moment beyond shadows to something even more basic that lives inside the collective unconscious, called an archetype. In Jung psychologies, archetypes are simple patterns that live inside the human mind. They are symbols or roles that show up again and again across cultures, like the heroes, the mother, the trickster, or the wise old man. These are universal images that exist in the deepest part of the collective unconscious. You can think of archetype as a blueprint of human behavior, because even when two cultures never meet, they somehow ended up with similar myths and characters anyway, right? That said, deep in the collective unconscious, next to these archetypes, there is also something called the collective shadow. This is different from the personal shadow you see in Persona 4. Jung described the collective shadow as a shared traits or idea that humans suppress and hide together. Okay, so now that you understand this, I'm gonna go back and link everything back to Persona. So, what are the collective shadows in Persona? Well, technically, they are the suppressed emotion shared among humans. This is clear in Persona 3, where the hidden wish to die build Erebus and summon Nyx. In Persona 4, it's part of us that would rather stay in the fog, stay comfortable, and avoid the truth. in Persona 5 is the feeling of the I'm too scared to choose for myself, so I just want a world where others decide for me, which is what summoned Yadabov. So to simply put it, the final bosses in the Persona game can be seen as God, which is a part of archetype, reacting or gaining power from the collective shadow.
I am a god. I'll teach you the truth of your minuscule existences.
Now, learning about all this, it makes me wonder, maybe the Velvet Room attendants are made in similar way too. Like, there are a mix of everything inside the collective unconscious that ego shape and give an ego to. Because for those who don't know, while Persona often show shadows as negative trait, Jung said that people also hide good trait. Remember just before the team awakened to their personas, their eyes start growing yellow. It showed that they finally accept the part of themselves that want to rebel against unfair authority. So think about it. If the gods can draw power from the collective shadow, then it should not be surprised that Igor can also draw from the positive forces inside the collective unconscious and give them form. Technically, this is how Morgana was created, remember? That said, this idea would also explain the attendant's boss-like level power. And well, they're technically a bosses, right?
I bring you Megidora.
But anyway, if every Velvet Room attendant has those golden eyes, why doesn't the new attendants from Persona 5X Merope have them? You can find out now in this video. And as always, thank you to all the members for supporting the channel, and I'll be seeing you guys next time when lore and game meets.